Hello everybody, I'm not quite sure who I'm talking to. My name's Gail Cartmail. We have a wonderful colleague from the TUC, Sian, who's in charge of all the controls. So if I'm just talking to the panel, Sian, can you give me a wave? So no, I'm talking to everybody. We're going to start very soon. There's 61 of you so far that's joined us, and we expect quite a few more. So if I can ask you to be a little bit patient. We're very excited about this session, and my understanding is that the Organise 2020 event is going very well, and I know this session will be outstanding, and we've got lots of messages coming in, lots of people joining and wishing us well. So thanks for all your good wishes. Big shout out for the Southwest TUC. Hello Nigel, good that you're here. Wow, we've got GMB Scotland, UCU at the University of Birmingham, NASUWT, hello Laura, Usdaw, hi Joe in Northumberland. Lots and lots of people from all over the UK joining us. It's really great to see. So we're still just hanging on here, and I've got Sian messaging me on WhatsApp, and we're going to make a start at 14:04. So it's countdown now, 60-second countdown. I can see Sian, she's going to give me a big thumbs up when we can go live. Right, okay, so we're going to go live now. So, well, welcome to the 71 people and our panelists to this really exciting session, which is about organising women, organising women's power in the union and women's power in the workplace. I've got some housekeeping to do before I make a couple of introductory remarks. And the first thing to say is we're being recorded, so do please be aware of that. Secondly is to welcome you all again. We have an absolutely fantastic lineup of speakers. I'm going to introduce them in a minute, and the speakers have been given a very strict time limit of 5 minutes, because what we really want is for you to have an opportunity to put forward your questions. Now, we have a code of conduct. In brief, the code of conduct for these conferences is respect, respectful listening, respectful dialogue, respect in every sense. And I believe Sian is going to put the full code of conduct up on the webinar chat, so you can see we have a zero tolerance to any disrespectful, aggressive, offensive or intimidatory behaviour. That's what you would expect, and that's what I know you would want. So let me just say a bit about the questions session. Sian again is going to be collecting your questions. Please use the question function. Now, if there isn't time to put all of your questions and for you to get answers to those questions, don't feel too frustrated, because I absolutely promise you that we will really make a note of the questions that we're unable to get to, and they will help inform our thinking for future actions. So don't hold back, keep going to the very last minute with your questions, because your questions can be insightful and they can help make a difference. Also, do feel free to use the chat function. There's no holding you back. Look, we've just got Michelle from Trade Union Education in Warrington. So you are using the chat function, and that's really good to see. We have to finish by 3 p.m. Because there are other sessions, and that's the absolute finishing time. I'm going to move on to introduce the speakers, but before I do, just to give, women are the majority of the trade union membership in our country, and we have important women, negotiators, organisers and decision makers. I would question, do we have enough? That may be a question you'd like to put to the panel. And also, does it make a difference having women in those positions arguing for collective strength and collective women's power in the workplace? So we're looking for experiences and insights. So let me just start by giving an apology. Lady Phyll was going to join us. She's the founder of Black Pride, one of many roles she holds. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to disappoint you, she won't be joining us today. We have a splendid panel. We have Vicky Smallman. Vicky is the National Director of Women's and Human Rights at the Canadian Labour Congress, an enormous organisation, and I look forward to hearing from Vicky. We have Shavanah Taj, who is the Acting General Secretary of Wales TUC. Marissa Begonia, who I'm delighted to say is a Unite representative, my own union, and coordinator of Justice for Domestic Workers. And last but by no means least, we have Christina Mcanea, who is the Assistant General Secretary of UNISON and carries many, many roles and has been a hugely active colleague during this pandemic. So we're going to start with Christine. So, we're going to start with Vicky. Vicky, we're keen to hear your experience and ideas about how women can break through all the barriers, both within the trade union movement, but also in their workplace. Not least the hindrance of unpaid caring and domestic work. That's been a big feature of this pandemic. Women having to grapple with so many roles all at the same time. Vicky, you're very, very welcome. You've got 5 minutes and we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you very much for asking me to come and join you today. It's great to be able to take some of the things that I've been thinking about within the Canadian context to sort of look at what we have in common, across oceans. Because really this pandemic is one that has affected women deeply and in a disproportionate way, and it's not one that, and I think it's going to have some lasting impacts, and there are things that are keeping me up nights that I'm very worried about. I'm sure you are as well. So I'm looking forward to an opportunity to talk about those things. It's such an important discussion. This pandemic has not only exposed the inequities and the barriers facing women in the world of work and in society, but it's made them worse. And without focused, committed action, my fear is that we're at a point where women's economic justice is about to be set back decades. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of the pandemic on women and women's work in particular, and offer some reflections on what it would take for a recovery plan to be gender responsive. And I hope to get into the issue of unpaid care. I think I will, because I do think it's at the core of what our challenge is right now. Women have been on the front lines of the crisis, and you know this, not just in hospitals and long-term care facilities, which have largely been staffed by women, but in food retail, cleaning, and other essential jobs, which put them at high risk of contracting the virus. And with the prolonged shutdowns, the introduction of mandatory mask policies, or shifts in service to accommodate physical distancing and other measures to reduce the risk for all of us, these workers risk exposure not only to the virus, but increasingly to violence and harassment at work, particularly from resistant, angry, and hostile clients, customers, and patients. For those of us who were involved in the negotiation of ILO Convention C-190, where we really had to fight for language around third-party violence, it's amazing to see this play out in such a visible way, and you can see how young women, racialized women, are really the ones that are receiving the brunt of people's pent-up kind of frustration and anxiety and stress at this moment. And they need support and they need protection. In Canada, women were hit hard in the first round of job losses, and what's not talked about as much is how, in addition to losing jobs, women were also reducing their hours of work. So you may not have lost your job completely, but in order to care for kids who are now at home because of schooling and childcare being closed, many have had to reduce their hours of work, or if you're working remotely, you may or may not be able to manage it all, and that causes all kinds of other consequences. The losses have been felt particularly in low-wage sectors here, and those are sectors in which racialized workers and workers who experience marginalization and oppression for multiple and intersecting identities are disproportionately represented. Immigrant women in Canada, for example, 43% of those who were employed in February are now unemployed, or they're working less than half-time. That is actually an incredibly stark statistic. And while we don't have the full picture because statistics are inadequate, we know that workers in the informal sector, domestic workers, sex workers, are really facing an almost total loss of income with little access to social protection, as most income replacement schemes have been tied to formal work. The impact on mothers has been severe. In Canada, more than 1/4 of the 2.25 million mothers of children under the age of 12 who were employed in February have lost their jobs, or more than 50% of their hours by April. And single parent mothers were more likely than mothers in two-parent families to lose work. Initially it seemed like we might be making some inroads on the gender equality files. There was a rapid mobilization in many countries to address the reality that sheltering in place was putting people who experience domestic violence, women and children primarily, at greater risk. Childcare was quickly deemed essential, and emergency childcare for frontline workers was mustered in many jurisdictions. Suddenly, workers who were doing jobs that are notoriously undervalued, and undervalued because the labor is considered to be women's work, were lauded as heroes and given pay bonuses. Despite these early, very promising signs, we have seen a stubborn resistance to implementing solutions that would meaningfully address some of the challenges facing women and people with families in particular. Even in Canada, where our government purports to be feminist and where a gender-based analysis is mandated for every cabinet decision, requests from feminist organizations to meet to discuss the recovery have gone unanswered, and decision makers have offered little more than thoughts and prayers to women who are really struggling, trying to manage it all, who are worried about the future, and many of whom are thinking that they may have to quit their jobs or reduce their work time when school goes back in September. And this is what's keeping me up nights. So as next year's return to school approaches, we are seeing tremendous anxiety that a gradual or partial return to in-person schooling, which is what they're talking about here, will force families to make difficult choices. And the childcare sector, already fragmented, underfunded, and inadequate, is on the brink, and many centers may close as parent fees alone cannot cover the costs required to maintain programs under strict infection control guidelines. Governments seem content to rely on the unpaid labor of parents, and let's be honest, women, to make up for their inability to provide adequate schooling for our children. Mothers have essentially been conscripted, forced to take on a soul-crushing load to keep our families safe from infection, supervise distance learning, wrangle bored and stressed kids, manage our household, all while juggling paid work or the financial strain of job loss or reduced work time. And it's perplexing that we see this dynamic unfolding with really no change, like really resounding silence on the part of decision makers. But not that surprising, because for generations, our society has relied on women to be there, to provide the care, to pick up the slack, to know what's needed and get it done. And that's what really keeps economies running, pandemic or no pandemic. Productivity is measured by hours worked, goods produced, without accounting for the labor of the people doing the work that needs to be done in homes. Paid work that looks like that work, cleaning, caring, nurturing, cooking, is undervalued because it's feminized. It's too close to what's expected to be free. So this pandemic is not gender neutral. We need a gender responsive recovery. The traditional patriarchal shovel-ready stimulus packages are not appropriate. There must be an equal, if not greater, investment in the care economy. Care must be at the core of this recovery. If nothing else, the pandemic has shown us how essential access to childcare is, and exposed decent work deficits in care services for seniors, people living with disabilities, with devastating and tragic results. We have to redouble our efforts to recognize, reduce, and redistribute unpaid care work, remunerate care workers fairly, and invest in the care economy. We need to resist messaging that pits unions' efforts to protect the health and safety of workers with parents and care recipients' rights to education and the services they need to ensure their well-being. And we need this organizing around care to be embraced by everyone in the labor movement. Yes, this challenge impact. Yes, I know I'm out of time, so I'm wrapping up.
You are out of time, and that is a wonderful place to stop. A wonderful place to stop. We need women to organise.
Yes. Well, we need everybody to organise. Yes.
Indeed, and the focus today is on the role of women. So thank you very much indeed, Vicky. And a quick shout out. Hello, Francis in Scotland. And hello, Gulsa from the Building and Woodworker International, who have joined us. Well done, everybody. I'm going to quickly move on, if I may. It makes me feel very proud indeed to say that we have an acting General Secretary who is a woman in Wales, Shavanah Taj. You're very welcome, Shavanah. And what we really want to hear from you is your journey in achieving trade union leadership. How have you got there? I'd quite like to ask, where are you going? But that may be sensitive. And how have you overcome the bumps in the road, Shavanah? We're really keen to hear from you. If I can just urge you to try and compress your comments in 5 minutes, and that will give us time to come back to the questions. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some space with some amazing trade union sisters. I started on the TUC Organising Academy back in 2002. I was placed with PCS Union for a period of a year. That year went gradually turned into about 18 years. I never thought that I would be there for that long, but I think that really does say something about the union itself and the leadership in terms of the value that it places on women, and the fact that they were very aware of the fact that the civil service in particular had a large proportion of women, and actually the membership was very diverse, and therefore it was extremely important that the people who were out organising on behalf of the union and recruiting people to the union needed to start looking like the membership and the potential membership that we would be recruiting. Prior to that, I had been a student, but also I'd worked in lots of different retail jobs, call centres, and you know, had pretty rubbish terms and conditions and so forth. So I guess I was pretty well primed, in a good position to understand what needed to change, what improvements needed to be made in the workplace. Outside of that, I've always had and played a real key role when it comes to organising women at a community level or grassroots level. I've been a trustee for an organisation called the Henna Foundation for a very, very long time. We specialise in supporting women who are facing domestic violence and honour-based abuse, and deal with some really complex cases and so forth. So I think that having all of that behind me and continuing to be involved in that level, as well as progressing in the trade union movement, you know, having started as an academy organiser, I then went on to organise in Whitehall, you know, across the civil service. And when we talk about the civil service, people often think of the archetypal white-collar worker, but actually within the civil service, there are a number of workers doing all types of jobs, including cleaners, security guards, you know, and so forth. So I met some amazing people along the way, had the opportunity to set up women's organising committees in the London South East region. We organised young members sections as well, and always made sure that we mentored and supported those individuals. None of it has been easy, however, what I will say is that actually I had the person who mentored me very much so at the start of all of this was a man. And he was a younger man himself, actually, at that time. He really encouraged me to keep at it, even when things got really difficult. And he would always say, Shavanah, you know, there isn't a foolproof answer to all of this. And actually the best way of learning sometimes is by making mistakes, so long as your mistake is not too big of a one where it's going to cost someone their livelihood. Otherwise, you should be okay. And as long as you learn something along the way. I come from a family, you know, that have of very strong women, and a father who was a trade unionist himself. And he always encouraged us to stand up for ourselves and to fight back, regardless of what it may have been, but also to make sure that you understand what showing solidarity actually means. And sometimes it means making sacrifices and doing things that you may be uncomfortable with to begin with. It's always been really important to me that it's not about me. And it is important that we share our experiences and share our stories, and we create opportunities for women in particular to come forward and to take up space, which is why today's event is so important to us. The previous speaker, Vicky, was talking about a number of issues that we have all faced. And those are key important issues here in Wales at the moment. We've been working very closely with government, particularly on the impact of COVID-19 on women, but also the impact of COVID-19 on minority women in particular. And I recognize, you know, many of those statistics. You know, again, when we talk about building back better, what does that actually mean? Because after the 2008 crisis, who were the people who were disproportionately impacted? It was young workers, it was BME people, and it was BME women in particular. So from my perspective, we need to do better when it comes to those individuals specifically, and we need to be very clear in terms of what our asks are and what we would like to see happen next. You know, it is interesting that, you know, there's some real opportunities for us going forward. And again, I just think that this is our opportunity to be encouraging people to make space. And as to leave you on something that another trade union sister of mine, Lynn Henderson from Scotland, says. She talks about step aside brother, and step aside brother really is that. It's about asking our brothers to step aside and to make space for women.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Shavanah. Your comments about step aside brother will certainly chime with Rachel, who's asked a question about how do we overcome men hogging positions, and we'll come to that hopefully in the Q&A session. And I particularly enjoyed the point you made about there being no foolproof answer, and it's okay to make mistakes. How else do we learn? So thank you so much for that. It's my pleasure now, if I may, to move on to Marissa. Marissa represents domestic workers. Domestic workers, of course, are invisible to many, to very many people who benefit from their work. We're very keen indeed, Marissa, for you to help us understand your experiences in organising women, in particular domestic workers. You're very welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very sorry, I'm not hiding. It's just my laptop has a camera problem. I've tried already other gadget, but it's not really working. So I had no option but to do this in laptop. Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. So, but also I would like to give correction. Yes, we are very known as Justice for Domestic Workers, but in 2017, we changed its name to the Voice of Domestic Workers. It's primarily because many of our members became undocumented after 2012. So the change has so much standing has so much to do with the kind of membership that we have at the moment, who are really very vulnerable. But everything is the same, only its name really. And we are registered as charity. And also we're looking forward actually before the lockdown. And we have been discussing already with Unite the Union about branch of domestic workers. So there is going to be a domestic workers branch in Unite the Union. I think that's one that is really positive. Yeah. So I think I myself, I had this big question at the very, very beginning. I think that was 2008. I was standing in front of Unite the Union building in Holborn. I had this question to myself, what the trade union could do for me as individual worker, because we are really individual workers in private households, very isolated, very vulnerable, and I myself have experienced so many different forms of abuse, from being sexually harassed, from being not paid, from working almost 24 hours work. But in my eyes, within Unite the Union, when we started organizing, I've seen so many fellow domestic workers being beaten, I could see those bruises, yeah, right in front in my eyes. Many of them couldn't even say they've been raped. They just throw a picture that they've been raped. Many of them had just the clothes they're wearing when they escape. Even they had no shoes, barefooted. I just feel like at that time how much we needed each other, to form as a group, so we could be better represented. We have better, stronger voice. We could be stronger as one group, and I think that's the very beginning of my role as the representative. Even I myself at that time has just escaped from abusive employer, but I realized that what happened to me is listening to my fellow domestic workers, seeing the situation is much, much more better, that I could speak out, that I could fight back, that I could escape the possible rape. I had that courage, but not many fellow domestic workers have that. And I just feel they needed someone who could truly understand and speak out for them. And one day they could speak for themselves as well. But I think it's easy for us to say, we need you to campaign, but without even looking at their actual primarily needs to address first, to help them first, to support them first. So seeing them without nothing, we just started with £1 a month, so they could have money to find new jobs. So, and also we're very fortunate and grateful being in Unite the Union. They opened the Sunday, every weekend, for us to do our classes. So we provided them English, IT classes, art classes, and training as well, because many of them couldn't read and write. How could we possibly ask them to campaign, to have the courage to stand up and speak out wherein their lives are shattered? So we began by looking at that, basic needs that they need first, yeah. And slowly, when they found job, they're receiving their salary already, then that's the time we start to talk about Unite the Union, about training them, why we need them to be the voice of their own rights, why we need them to stand up, because try to let them understand. If you don't say what happened to you, no one will really know. No one will understand us. No one will really know about us. And the only way to do that, so people understand that, we want people to talk about us, to help us, then we need to stand up, voice out, and fight. Yeah, and we're not alone for that. I think that to get the every Sunday gathering that we had in United Union, that we feel comfortable, we are safe, we have a space of our own, that we eat together, we chat together, whether that is about organization, whether that is about personal problems, sharing our own stories. I think that also help us so much, you know, to have the courage to be confident. But also, I think I myself, maybe many of them would say thank you to me for helping and supporting them. But actually, no, they actually also helped me more, you know, from, I thought one thing that I could never really imagine, that I would be doing what I have been doing all these years to represent them. And not only that, I think TUC and United Union has sent me to United Nations in Geneva during the ILO Convention 189 2 years discussion. Yeah, so I was the voice there of our trade union. And I think that's one positive that both the United Union and the TUC have done. But also I've been to the New York for a high-level dialogue on migrants. So I think putting forward workers ourselves, you know, to speak out on our own instead of others speaking for us, wherein actually we can talk so much about us. And
Marissa?
also, yeah, I just
Marissa,
think,
it's Gail
yeah.
here. We're trying to message you. If we could wrap up now, I mean, what you're saying is massively significant and important, and
Yeah.
people would like to ask questions. So
Yeah, sure.
if I can wrap this, your contribution up now, take our next speaker and then dive into questions. Is that okay with you?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's good, Charles. Can I just say a little bit, just one sentence maybe? I think workers' involvement is very central to the work we do. And of course, looking at the ensuring that that we advocate and campaign for policies that include all workers and not that divisive. And yeah, so that's making sure that policies work for domestic workers, and we can never even talk about equality without including domestic workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Marissa. That was great. And I'm grateful that you introduced the issue of violence against women, but also the importance of support from people who truly understand, which speaks to the importance of women in all levels of our organisation. I'm going to move quickly on, if I may, to my good friend and sister, Christina Mcanea from UNISON. Your union, Christina, the majority of members in your union are women, and you're a strong woman leader. We need more women like you, and we need more strong women activists. What are your ideas about developing a new generation of women activists, empowering women to take up the role, but importantly, what do you think works? You've got to this position, and so what works? Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Gail. Yeah, Gail's already said, so UNISON has got about 1.3 million members, and over 1 million of them are women, and it makes us the biggest women's organisation in the country. And that's a responsibility that we have to take really seriously. So it's not just about representing our members, the women in the workforce, but actually about speaking out on women's issues in general is massively important to us as a trade union. And so I just wanted to highlight my job description. My job title is Assistant General Secretary for Bargaining, Negotiations and Equalities. And the reason I wanted to say it was because that was a deliberate decision to embed the equalities work very firmly within our negotiating and bargaining work, because we recognise that that's something that has to be done across our union if we are to adequately and properly represent the over 1 million women who are members of our union. And I think, Gail, you've asked, you know, what is it we can do? So there are structural things we've done within the union which help. So we 2/3 of all of our main committees and conferences, etc., are women. But that's not enough in itself, because when you go below that and you look at things like the branch structures and different types of reps within the union, it's still nowhere near. So, you know, the 80% that women make up in our union are nowhere near represented in that. So I think the important thing for us is to look beyond that, and how do we reach out and encourage women in the union to become active in the union. That's important to us, but also not everyone who joins wants to be active. So it's about how do we as a union make sure that we are delivering on things that matter to the women who've taken the trouble to join our union. And I just wanted to focus on 2 areas, if that's okay. In particular, we've got 2 big areas for us are our care workers and school staff members, and they've been very important during the whole pandemic. And can I just say, I thought Vicky's analysis of what happened in Canada so mirrors what happened in this country. And just, you know, half of all the deaths from COVID-19 in this country were in the care sector, and care workers are dying at twice the rate they should be, given the sort of general, where they are in the general population. And that, I think those figures speak for themselves in terms of how difficult it's been to try and deal with things in the care sector. And if anything's been keeping me awake at night, that's the thing that keeps me awake at night, is the work we've been trying to do in the care sector. But if I can just mention those 2 areas. So some of the things we've been doing has been around trying to reach out to people directly. So during the pandemic, we've got something like about 190,000 care workers, and we've got email addresses for about 115,000 of them. And we started emailing them directly every single week, covering issues that we thought were important to them. And equally importantly, giving them contact so they could come back to us with issues. We've tried to do something similar. If I use the school staff analogy, again, a big issue, schools in early years, hugely important during the pandemic, big issues about return to work. And they've been a big group within the union for 10, 15 years now, and we've been trying to encourage branches and regions to set up networks for those particular groups. And that's because they often they were disassociated from the branch they've been put into. You know, they work in a school somewhere, they're not necessarily part of the big local government branch that they're a member of. And so it's about how do you involve them in the union, and setting up contacts and structures for them has been really rewarding for us in terms of giving them a voice. Still loads of work to be done, but at least we're getting there. So we have a very active Facebook group for our school staff. We do regular quick surveys, and we get things like 40,000 people reply to a school staff survey. So, you know, we're getting a good engagement, but there's still more that can be done, I think, in terms of reaching out to get people more actively involved in the union. And, you know, I won't go into, we all know the problems, some of the reasons why it's important for us to be organising in those sectors. You know, Vicky and others have touched on it. They're predominantly women, predominantly low paid, or at least relatively low paid. And the skills that people do aren't properly recognised and rewarded in society. So again, it's about getting that message out. And Gail, you asked, you know, what is it we can do to make our unions more attractive to women and get women more involved. And I think for me, one of the key things has been to try and make sure that what we see as what is considered to be women's issues are actually very, very clearly trade union issues. So fighting against low pay, trying to end insecure work, fighting for access to training for everyone, recognition of the skills and roles that people have in society, sort of ending this idea that you get paid more for collecting tickets at a train station or for looking after animals in a zoo. And that's no disrespect to people who do that job, but you get paid more for that than you do for looking after children in a nursery, by and large, or for looking after elderly people in a care home. And so it's about changing societal and structural expectations, if you like, about how people are paid. But I think the key thing for me as well is also to not assume that women are a big homogenous group. And that's one of the things that I try and focus on with the teams that I work with in Unison, is bearing in mind that, you know, when we've got over 1 million women members, they're not all the same. They don't all have the same issues to deal with. They don't all have the same things that annoy them or that they want to see changed. That people come from different places in their lives, and we have to bear in mind. So we campaign on things like disability rights, LGBT+, the issues around Black staff. All of these things interact so closely and significantly with the issues that affect women, and you know, trying to make sure that when we campaign on things like the menopause or sexual harassment at work or any kind of women's health issues, these are very much trade union workplace issues, and they're not an add-on. They're sort of trying to get them woven into the kind of discussions that we have day in and day out, or week in and week out with employers, is incredibly important. And I think all of that helps us to present ourselves not just as a women-friendly organisation, but very much a women-centred organisation. But we've still got a long way to go, and I think the trade union movement has a long way to go. We've got much better at giving women a voice, but this is it's still very much a work in progress as far as Unison, and I'm sure as the trade union movement are concerned. But I'll stop there, Gail. Thank you.
No, that is fantastic, Christina. Work in progress is exactly the place to stop. And you mentioned recognising the experiences that Vicky shared. And Joe put on the chat panel, different countries, same issues. And I'm really happy that you pointed out that anything we negotiate that's good for women is good for all workers. You can't have too much equality. You touched on a subject, Christina, and other speakers did allude to it, about structures. And a couple of our questions came in from Steve and from Rachel, really touching on that. So how do we create an enabling environment to encourage women to take a lead in organising? Well, some of the speakers have demonstrated by examples, but there is an issue around, how to put this, occasionally men are reluctant to give up their positions in branch structures or regional structures, occasionally reluctant to step aside. How did the Step Aside campaign resonate in the unions, in your experience? Do you have a similar in Canada, you know, to encourage more space for women in leadership positions?
No, actually, we don't. I'm intrigued by the Step Aside campaign, I have to say. We do a lot of work trying to provide women with, you know, the skills, the confidence. We invest a lot in educating women leaders and in helping to train women to run for office, whether it's in their union or public office. But yes, this problem of men not stepping aside, and in some cases, handing over the mantle of leadership to somebody that looks like them, right? Not really owning that that you need to invest in creating sort of an environment where a successor that doesn't look like you can move up, and that is something that we've been wrestling with. You know, ultimately, a lot of pressure has relied on women leaders to provide all of the mentorship, all of the advice, all of the support, that enabling environment to not just open doors for themselves, but, you know, leave the door open for others to walk through. And it really is time, I think, to challenge men to take on some of those mentoring responsibilities. And it's something that we've been thinking about a little bit. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what the others say, only to just say that, yeah, it's not enough to rely on women's efforts to change this culture within our own organizations. And I would say too, it's not just about women, right? It's also about not white people. Like, it's the full like layer of diversity that needs to be reflected, because our members are diverse. They're, you know, they have multiple and intersecting identities, and we need Black leaders. We need, you know, gay, lesbian leaders. We need the full gamut.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And I have the privilege of being able to see the panel, and Shavanah is nodding vigorously. So let me bring you in, Shavanah. What do you think about Step Aside?
So Step Aside, brother, as I say, is the idea of a trade union sister called Lynn Henson from Scotland. Lynn and I work together and really good friends, have known each other for a very long time. And the idea behind this, well, it's kind of a concept that really should be a campaign. And she's been talking about it both within PCS, but also given opportunities to speak in other places as well. And the concept is actually quite simple, and it is very much around what's already been referenced by Vicky and others, and that is that we ask our brothers to step aside and for our sisters to step forward. And actually, for those sisters who have stepped forward and when they look around them, they see other white women, then actually the idea would be that they step aside, and for, you know, for BME women, for Black women, for LGBT women to come forward as well. And the idea being that there is much space here, and you know, our brothers have been in leadership positions for a very long time, and we're not asking them to disappear off the face of the earth and leave the room altogether. This is about encouraging women, but not having to wait for that change to happen. And it is about creating space now and not having a formal sort of program before anything changes. You can, you know, this idea of supporting and mentoring can happen on the job, so to speak. We have, you know, women have, you know, we have, you know, intersectional lives, we have lots of lived experiences, and the assumption is always that, for example, women have never negotiated. Well, you don't know how to negotiate. Well, actually, more often, women are the ones who are running their households. They are, you know, dealing with all the bills that are coming through the door. They are having to negotiate on so many different levels, for example. So why can't they be in that leadership role? So I think, you know, that's the idea behind it. But it is also about flipping things on their heads. So it's a difficult one. It's a tough one. You know, the first time that Lynn presented it, there were a couple of faces in the room, but it's a challenge and one that we can move on if we choose to do so. It's a choice.
Thank you very much, Shavanah. I was a beneficiary of a campaign run by the women of the Building and Woodworker International, and their campaign slogan was "Vote for Change, Vote for Women." And I'm pleased to say that one of the vice presidents stepped aside, enabling me to be the first woman vice president, but it was the women's slogan that transformed the leadership of the organisation, so it can work. I'm just trying to move to another area which a number of people have come in on. Laura asks about mental health, talks about mental health, the impact of the pandemic, disproportionate impact potentially on women. Are we kitted up to deal with this, Christina? I'll bring you in as well, Marissa, just to give you notice. I'd be interested to hear your work with domestic workers on mental health. Christina.
Yeah. Hi, Gail, thanks. Sorry, can I just quickly say something about the last conversation, which was, if people are interested, our Glasgow City Council equal pay issue, when we got that going, the officer who dealt with it, a fantastic woman, a big part of that was about working with the men in the branch, to work with the women, to bring the women through and make this a women-centred campaign. And that it was difficult to start with, but actually it worked really well. And if anyone's interested in more info on that, just let me know and I can put you in touch with the wonderful women who ran it. Yeah, on mental health, yeah, this has become probably one of the big issues for us now. I think across the union movement, this is becoming the big issue. This is something that's coming through very clearly from the pandemic. I think there's still a long way to go. And I think there's still all those issues around mental health still being a bit of a taboo issue in many areas, and in many sectors it's difficult to talk about it. I think trying to get good guidance and information and get employers to deal with it in a way that feels supportive to people who feel they're suffering from mental health issues is a challenge for us all. But one that I think we are beginning to look at, so I noticed my union and a number of other unions, if you go on the COVID websites, they've all got information on this. ACAS have taken it up as a big issue. So I think it is gaining momentum, the fact that the mental health issues that we're expecting, which are currently happening and expecting to come out of COVID, that's not going away anytime soon, and one that I think we'll be dealing with for months and months, if not longer.
Thanks very much, Christina, for that. Marissa, in the safe spaces that you and other women have created, from the description of experiences you gave, I imagine mental health is an issue. Does this inhibit self-organisation of women? And what's your advice on this issue?
Yes, I think for migrant domestic workers who during the COVID, so as you can see, many of them have escaped from abusive employment. They've been locked up inside the household. They've been starved to almost death, that they could go in the flat cat, that's how skinny they are. And to be out of touch with other people, with no communication. So the lockdown, at the very beginning, we've been receiving a lot of complaint about being terminated without pay. But also imagine the children, the parents are at home and not going anywhere. Imagine how is that double up the work hours of domestic workers who are live-in, but also how does COVID-19 stop them from going out because of they need to isolate, but also how they put up on the families when they have this COVID and they've been infected with no protection, on how they complain of express themselves on they're actually back to where they came from, or being isolated or being lonely, alone. So we immediately, but also I think the problem on they couldn't work, they have no money to send to their families. So that's another additional problem for the suffering the mental health issues. But we continue to do the classes by transforming it immediately to online. So and we could see them, online exactly they're looking after the children while they're attending the classes. We see them being pulled out because they need to attend to the medicine that for the elderly they're looking after. Also, so they don't have that much freedom, but they try to attend the classes. But also we continue to do the one-to-one, what is that called? One-to-one session with counseling. But I think the most important, we call them and find out how they are and how they are dealing with the current crisis, and we share each other, my situation, their situation. We immediately put up the emergency hardship fund to send them some money, to send them groceries, and we're grateful to every borough of London that they could buy us groceries and deliver to them, because many domestic workers, even in their employer's household, they're not being fed, and especially during the day off that they should be buying their own food, but because they are forbidding to go out and buy their own, they couldn't buy their own food, but also the threat of losing their job. If you go out, don't come back. So that there's so many uncertainty, of course, that causing so much problem mentally and emotionally to all of them. But I think that's what we're doing to continue to do, to provide them financial support, groceries, food that they need, and also even the PPE. Yeah, we send them by post because their employer won't provide that, and also. Of course, in terms of one-to-one counseling, we couldn't give that to all of them, but I think we continue to talk to one another, either in Messenger, WhatsApp. We continue to provide them the training. We ask them to talk about the situation. We put up so many videos. They video themselves, yeah, and then they send that to me, and then I will put that up to raise awareness on what happening to domestic workers. The fact that they are more ready and prepared to do that by making themselves, of course, to make sure that we are there for them, that we are not doing something that will put them more problems, especially
Marissa,
the undocumented. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to speak over you again, but we have literally 2 minutes, and you gave us a really excellent flavour of how even in the most difficult of circumstances, you and others have been capable and imaginative in agile organising, not just during the pandemic, but before the pandemic, and the importance to women of practical support. And I think all of the panelists have touched on the importance of practical support. And I know that we haven't addressed all the questions. Philip asked, well, with so much privatisation of the public services, have we made a bad situation worse in that people can't get facility time to do their trade union organising? There's a huge number of really pertinent questions, all banking up here, but I can assure you that Sian and the TUC staff and myself are looking at the questions. We will really give them a lot of thought, and they will inform our thinking. So with just 60 seconds to go, I'd like to thank the very many people who are participating today, because you've come from all over the world. This has been a global organising event around women's power. So it's brilliant that you've been able to do that despite time differences. And can I just, I don't know if anybody can do this, but, oh no, I can't. I was going to do a virtual clap for our excellent panel. So I'd like to thank Vicky, thank you, from Canada. I'd like to thank Shavanah from God's own country, Wales. Marissa, I don't know where you are, Marissa, but thank you very much. And Christina, I know you're around the corner from me in Streatham. So thank you all very much. And thank you, Sian, who's also around the corner in West Norwood, for making this event possible. Thank you. It's been very enjoyable, very informative. You've got a world to win, sisters and brothers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.